Good mid-morning, I guess it is. I'm Andrea Lane with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Ambassador Real Estate, and this is 30 Minutes with a Realtor, where we take a chance to talk to somebody like Matt or various other people with stuff that has to do with real estate in some facet. So last month we talked about homeowners insurance, and we're kind of talking about another insurance for your home that, for lack of a better term, kind of gets thrown away. Like, when you ask people about title insurance, they sign their paperwork and never know past that. So introducing Matt Thiel. He's with RTS Title or DRI or any one of their sister companies. So you probably worked with him or one of their companies indirectly and didn't know it. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate being here. And yeah, you described it about right. We're the hidden gem behind your title or behind your home ownership that a lot of people don't realize. They don't know. They just, even when I describe to my friends what I do, I say I work for DRI Title, and they get the confused look on their face. And then I say, well, you know that big stack of paper that you sign at closing? I go, that's us. I go, and then we provide the insurance back behind that, but nobody really knows. Nobody pays attention. They just know they got to have it to close.
Right.
That's kind of where it sits.
Well, and it's a small section in the purchase agreement, and I really feel that it kind of gets thrown to the wayside. Like, everybody kind of marks it off or doesn't really know to ask any questions. Mm-hmm. And hence why we're here today and why we're talking about some of it was, what is it? Why do we have it? And to pay better attention, because I'm lucky in that Andrea, my friend who works with DRI and RTS, was always like, you need to do expanded. So the first question I want to discuss right now is expanded to basic title, because I don't really think that people understand that there is an importance to one over another. And oftentimes it's not just a buyer who doesn't understand it. It's also agents who have no clue why it's important to understand the difference between the two, and why you should kind of pay more, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Because title insurance is a one-time fee.
Yep.
Paid at the time that you purchased your home.
And it's also normally split between the buyer and seller. So
correct.
As a buyer, when you pick your basic or your expanded policy, you're only paying for half of what you're choosing. Unless at this point, with the way the market is right now, maybe you're paying the full thing, to get a better offer.
Sure. But if you're paying for the whole thing, wouldn't you rather get the best coverage?
You would.
Rather than just settling for basic. Like
now, and that's a good thing too. Like, in not understanding what the difference between basic and expanded is, expanded policy is only about 25 to 30% more premium than what the basic is.
Okay, why don't you say that again?
It's 25
to get expanded over basic.
To get expanded over the basic. Now, basic, just a real quick scenario or description is the reason that it's so cheap, and it's not like your homeowner's insurance where you keep paying year after year, is because with the basic policy, when you close, whatever your closing date is, we do an update on our title commitment. Now, our title commitment shows any liens on your property, any other encumbrances. Make sure your taxes are paid so you don't have a tax lien. Any judgments that may be out there. Child support can hit your commitment as well.
Yep. Child support, if you owe taxes to federal or state.
Yep. Any other judgment that may be on you can attach to your property.
Construction liens.
And so on a basic policy, that title commitment will show everything that we know is of public record.
Okay.
So it's a search we do with the county and with the courts to find judgments or whatever. And what we do is we list that out. And in order for us to issue you a policy, you have to pay that stuff off. So, and a lot of times on a purchase, you're paying the seller, but they have to pay off their mortgage.
Right.
Whatever lender it is. And then if they have the taxes, if they're not up to date, we have to bring those to date so that there's not a tax lien on your property when you move forward. So basic just basically makes sure that you have a clean title when you take ownership of your property. But it stops there and it goes backwards. And the thing is we can do a search on it so we know it's there.
Right.
And basic is one of those things that we cover. Say we miss one. If somebody has a line of credit that we didn't catch, well, your insurance policy will cover that. You're not going to have to pay that as a new owner of your property. So that's the basic. Expanded then takes that a little bit further, where it actually extends some coverages forward after the closing. And this is kind of the big deal. And I've got some claim examples that we can run through real quick too.
Sure. But what I really wanted you to touch on was the difference between that basic and standard, or basic and expanded.
Yep.
Is less than 25 to 30% of what you're paying. So I think in people's minds, they see $300 and the difference could be maybe $350 to get expanded, which is the better coverage. So it's not like a heavy amount.
No, not at all. And just on an example I have, and these are all our rates have changed, but just to give you an example,
this was expanded or basic?
This is the comparison of the premiums.
Okay.
So basic on a $150,000 house, this would have been a couple years ago, would have been $557.50. So
split between the seller and the buyer.
Yep, split between seller and buyer.
So like $260 maybe a piece.
Yes, I'm gonna agree with
You're
you.
Good.
Something
You're
like that. 280,
give or take a few bucks.
$259.99. Yeah, but then the extended coverage, the expanded policy is only $670.
So less than $100 difference between the two.
Yeah, you're per person, it's less than $100.
Right.
And like you said, it's a one-time fee. So, and this covers you from the entire time from when you take possession of that property until you're out of it. And basic is the same way, but just when you're paying that 25 to 30% on your premium, and you get that for the life that you're in that house is incredibly cheap. And there's not a lot of title insurance claims that are paid. A lot of time it's more negotiating or taking on the attorney fees. And
but that in of itself will far outweigh the $75 extra you paid,
right? Because
an attorney's fees are going to be starting at $1,000, like if that, like it's probably way more than that.
We estimate just for conversation's sake, we estimate between $1,500 and $2,500, and that might just be the money up front in order to retain an attorney.
Sure.
So right there, the $75, it's potentially getting you $1,500, $2,500.
Right. That's better than You can't put a number on that. And so, and I think what people don't understand with having that adjustment for title insurance is that they're like, oh, well, I'm never going to need it.
Right.
Which I know that with your examples, and we kind of talked about that before when we talked about kind of getting, is that I think people are quick to say, oh, I don't need it. There's the people who owned it for a really long time. There's not any problems with it or whatever. What are some of the things that you've seen that? So
this leads in perfect to, for sure, that and even on a basic policy, the people owned it forever. Well, what did they do where they got out of the property? Was there a death somewhere down the line where maybe there's an unknown heir that didn't get their piece of the pie back in 1985?
Right.
And it's just sitting out there. Well, all of a sudden, maybe not even them, but their kid gets word of this or something like that. Now they come up and now they have a link and a vested interest in your property. Well, basic title will cover that. Expanded title will cover that. So it's just one of those things like you would never think about, but there can always be something lurking. And for the price that you pay at the closing, it's incredibly valuable. But yeah, a lot of people don't, it's an intangible. They don't feel it. It's not it's not the warm fuzzy feeling.
Right.
It's just that they know they have to have it. And just an example. Let me run through this one because it's easy.
Sure.
And people can relate to this.
Okay.
And this is an expanded.
Okay.
So, and I didn't make up these names. This came from our underwriter's website. So,
I love it.
This is a claim where an individual purchased a house.
Okay.
And then after the fact, a lien was put on that house that wasn't hers.
Oh.
So
from the previous owner. Okay.
So Loretta is the buyer. She loves her new home. She especially was thankful for the fact that the seller replaced the roof so she wouldn't have to spend the money for the unexpected surprise of a leaking roof, which is a great deal. She had that problem on her prior house, but we don't care about that. Much to her surprise, as it turned out, the seller never paid the roofing contractor. So, say it's February.
Right.
The seller gets the roof replaced. Looks really nice. Loretta, the buyer, loves it. Well, then they end up closing on the house.
Right.
Well, the seller never pays the roofing contractor. Well, as far as the title company knows, there's not a lien on that property.
Right.
But the roofing contractor still has a mechanic lien that's going to hit the property if it's not paid. Well, the seller's going to take their money and get out.
Right.
And it's the buyer's problem now. So now, at this point, Normally what would happen, because titles like the hidden gem that people don't think about,
right,
is they're going to kind of complain back and forth. They're going to get in arguments. You owe this. The roofer's going to say, I don't care where I get it from.
Right. They don't care. They just want their money.
They just want their money because they're going to throw that into another project and they got to get it going.
Right.
So what would you do next? You would contact your own attorney and say, hey, I don't know this, defend me or whatever it's going to be.
Right.
Well, what you should do with an expanded policy is you should reach out to your title insurance carrier, and then you can turn in that claim because that's a covered claim. Because it's
covered for expanded.
Covered for expanded.
Not for basic.
Now, basic it wouldn't be because it's not a lien that's on the property prior to you closing.
Okay.
So with that extra $75 per person, now you're looking at whatever that roof costs: $3,000, $5,000, $8,000,
let's just
whatever
say
it
it's
is.
$1,500 was the deductible. Let's
There you go.
just to throw it right.
Yeah. So
but
now,
still, even a $1,500 lien, like you said, you're looking at $1,500 just for the attorney to even take your call and look at the paperwork, because they're not going to do any of that for free.
No. So and that's where in this particular part, she just closed on her house, so she thinks back and thinks, well, I have title insurance, so she reaches out to the title insurance company. Well, they come in, and of course they've got their attorneys there, and what they do is they actually negotiate this out, and they work with the seller. And I don't remember if it's a payment plan or whatever, but they get it taken care of where it doesn't cost Loretta a dime outside of what she already paid for her title insurance.
Right.
So, and in here it just says, imagine her relief when she knows that the title insurance company is going to take care of this problem for her.
Right. She doesn't have to deal with it.
And she doesn't have to do anything with it other than let them know that it's there.
That's the best $75 she spent, is what that is.
It is. And, and everybody can relate to that because, especially in Nebraska, we have hail, every, I don't know,
5 to 8 years. According to my insurance guy that was on last time, about every 5 to 8 years, you're going to replace a roof.
And that seems about right. It was 2013, and what was it,
2017 was a tornado
18?
in Bellevue, so yeah. And then, and all the hailstorms that we have because of crazy, storms and things like that. And we've already had, obviously, a crazy 2020, and 2021 is, apparently said, hold my drink and let me raise you one.
Right.
So I just feel like we're going to be in for some storms this year So, and I want to kind of take a step back really quick so that everybody that's here, and some of this is going to be kind of rehashing because it's part of a purchase agreement. And I really feel that both from an agent standpoint, as well as from a buyer standpoint, because sometimes they're some of the same. I've seen agents who are buying for themselves who didn't know that they should ask for expanded title coverage. And I said, well, it's like buying a car. And if you were buying a car and you had the chance when you were buying it to get the really best warranty or just a kind of warranty, yes, you might have to pay a little extra, but it's not a lot. Which would you choose to do? And everybody always says, well, I get the really good warranty. I want the great warranty. But the amount that don't market, because I see from my side being a listing agent also, where they just mark basic. And I feel like maybe they're not educating their buyer enough. And I had an agent this last year who was like, why are you asking for expanded title coverage? And I was like, always mark expanded title coverage, because my friend Andrea, who's at the title company, always says do expanded, ask for a plot plan, because the plot plan also goes with that insurance to say where the boundaries were at the time that you purchased your property. And I'm sure most people just toss that title book into, a drawer somewhere, and then they never see it again. But so the property boundaries are what is recorded at the Sarpy or Douglas County or whatever county you're in courthouse, which says, hey, here's where your property is, or here's how it's been recorded, because they don't actually come out and find pins. Every once in a while you get a surveyor who does, because I've had a couple who came out to find them.
Yep, you can get a surveyor that'll come out and they'll find each pin, they'll mark them off, and then they'll figure if it's 76 feet, 78 feet across. They'll give you the exact thing when they find the pins, but I think that's going to cost you a little bit more.
Right. Well, we've done that. I've done it a couple times with my buyers, where if the property itself, especially in new construction, if they're selling relatively from the time that they bought it, they didn't put a fence in, but the new buyer coming in goes, well, we want to get a fence. So we've changed it from plot plan to be a full survey, because then they can use that to get their fence without having to pay for it twice.
Right.
But so that was how she always instructed me. But I've had a couple agents just this past year who were like, well, why are you doing a plot plan? And I was like, well, a plot plan is part of their closing costs, so it's not, but it just validates that title insurance. It's just another piece to it. Explain, kind of get into.
Well, and getting into the expanded side of this, which is I mean, kind of where we're leaning towards, I guess, here. So I said it covers you after you close, right? There's some of the coverages that carry forward. Well, the encroachments on your property,
because that's where I see it the most.
That's one of the huge ones. And I don't, not that you guys can see this, but out of the extra coverages, there's probably 15, just extra expanded coverages. 4 of them are encroachments, and
so
one is
maybe for everybody out there, an encroachment.
It would be
when something comes onto your property.
Right. So your neighbor, he has a really cool shed. He's got a man cave in the back of his house, and it actually extends, 4 feet onto your backyard. So, that's your backyard. So, and whether you have the plot plan or not, this will cover that. But yeah, and so what it would do is, you're not going to probably force him to tear that building down. But what you may end up doing through the negotiation of the title company is you may just maybe cut out that little piece of land and have him buy that piece of land from you.
Okay.
And kind of solve it that way. Because, you don't want to move into a new house and then now you just hate your neighbor. It's the worst scenario.
Which does come up.
It does come up.
And that's usually where you find it is somebody doesn't like the neighbor, somebody finds out from a boundary, or usually I've seen the most of it with fences. Yeah. Like this side of the fence is, a foot onto the other property, and it creates a title closing issue because people who own the property say, we want you to remove that fence because it encroaches our property. People who have the fence say, well, I don't want to pay for the fence.
Right. And in that scenario, now obviously you'd have to buy the house as is and then turn in your insurance claim, and then it would be paid for that way.
Right.
But it also covers if that man cave shed is not there. But after you purchase your house, then it's built, it covers that as well. Mm. Or and vice versa. If you build something and it encroaches onto their property, it covers that. So, there's just different situations where, because and when you're doing this, it's probably not going to be a big deal. But when you go to sell and somebody else does their plot plan, it's like, well, your man shed is
hanging over
10 feet over into the neighbors. Mm-hmm. Like, well, you got to fix that before I buy it. Well, I'm not going to just pick up a building and move it.
Right.
So then there's your title insurance claim where it comes in. You've got your title insurance for the life of you being in that property. So then work with your title insurance company, and they can come in. They can negotiate out whatever you want to do with that. And, then it works without the buyer having to spend money because they already did to get the insurance.
Sure.
So.
Well, and they don't have to necessarily because the title companies can kind of hash it out. You're not having to be like face to face with your neighbor being kind of the bad guy, so to speak, when you're going to live there, but you want to resolve the issue of like, where is it at? And that's usually why I do expand it, is because unless you put that fence in, you can't guarantee that the boundaries were put in specifically for that property.
Right. And as you had mentioned before, just getting to the expand, where you always mark expanded on the policy or on the purchase contract. And one of the reasons that I tell agents the reason to do that is you don't want to put basic on there and just say, no, you don't need that. You don't need expanded. You just need basic. We'll save you a couple $100. Okay.
It's not a couple hundred though. We just talked it's literally, just fractions.
But say it's even $300 total. You've got a $1 million house or whatever the situation might be. You're going to pay $150 extra per person to get this extra coverage. But, a lot of times it just gets marked like you only need basic. Well, now you as the agent just advised your client to take something less than what was available.
Right.
So now whose E&O is that going to hit when they find out later
we could have
that it could have been covered, and now they're paying attorney fees and things like that.
Right.
So you always, and I used to be on the P&C side too.
Okay.
And the example was always like, if you have $1 million policy for your liability, offer the $1 million. Don't offer $500 because you're saving them money. And the reason is, and this is the example, insurance people use this, is
I love it.
Say your 16-year-old son drives into a bus of attorney's kids.
Right, because they're all covered, but you're not.
Right. And you're going to have plenty of legal work on that to try to defend yourself. But now, you talked me into $500,000, but I have $1 million available. Okay, well, why didn't you tell me I needed $1 million? How come you didn't know that as my insurance agent? And this is the same thing here. As you're checking the basic or expanded, you want the expanded, and then have them tell you, no, I just want the basic.
Right.
Then it's like, okay, well, I offered you this just so you know.
Right.
And then it takes yourself off the hook as a professional. It throws it back on that client because that's what they chose. So, it's just one of those things, just being a smart advisor and giving them the best that they can get. And if they don't want it, then it's their choice to kind of back it down to what they prefer or what's best for them.
Right. Now, you said out of those, like 4 of the 6 or whatever were encroachment.
Yep.
What were the other ones?
Some of the other ones, one, there's just an automatic increase of coverage, which in this market, the way it is now, is fantastic. So what it does is it actually will go up 10% a year for 5 years. So after 5 years, you have 150% of the value that you paid for it. Now, imagine you bought your house in 2020 or 2019. Now all of a sudden, this $280,000 house is worth $310,000. Well, you're covered. So it's a huge thing on that. Say the previous owner put on a deck with his buddies, and everybody pays themselves with, hey, I'll get a case of beer and some pizza. Come on over, help me build a deck. Well, a lot of times they're not going to pull a building permit.
Right.
Well, if you get an assessor coming out and saying, well, wait a minute, I don't show that you have a deck,
permit.
A building permit.
Right.
Well, they may have you tear that down and then get a building permit or whatever. Well, something like that's going to be covered. So it's
that's big, because I've had a lot of people ask about that recently. Is that if they didn't get a building permit, would we be covered? But you're saying under expanded, yes.
Expanded, yes.
Basic,
no.
Okay, just making sure for clarity for everybody out there that we're.
And then just one more thing. So I know this has come up in our subdivision just recently because the covenants had renewed, and it was a big conversation back and forth. The next door neighbor app, it was just going back and forth. It's not worth it. We don't need it. Yes, it is. We don't want somebody's trailer sitting in their driveway for
right.
a whole winter or whatever. Just trying to keep the neighborhood neat or whatever. But some of the things like, well, you can't have a certain type of basketball hoop.
Yep.
You can't have a pool that's so far above
ground. Yep.
Well, if somebody does that, any loss from a violation of a subdivision law resulting in the inability to obtain a building permit is included as a coverage for expanded. So, if they do something that isn't in line with what your covenants are with your subdivision, or maybe it prevents you from getting a building permit to do something,
sure,
then that's going to be covered. And a lot of times, like I said, it might not be something paid physically to get the permit, but it's going to be maybe attorney fees just to represent you in that situation.
You'll be happy to have the permit at that point compared to an attorney's fees. I'm
right.
sure that permit's going to be cheaper.
Right. Yeah, but some of these things might not be things that you'll know or even think about. It's just something, the deck is on the house or the, whatever it might be. And you're looking like, oh my God, this is awesome. I can host people out here. I can have fun, have parties, whatever. And then you find out that they didn't have a building permit to do it. Well, then, who handles that? Well,
right.
It's you, the attorney, the, whoever. And instead, turn to your title insurance policy. And if nothing else, they'll deny the claim. And then you've got to go another route. But, it's a good place to start in order to get at least the legal advice or some direction on how you need to handle it.
What's one of the craziest things title-wise that you guys have had to handle, for lack of a better term?
I hope this is real wood.
I know, right?
we have not had real issues with claims. Sometimes there might be something where, like, maybe the taxes were miscalculated, which is easy to do. We're busy middle to end of the month, and just it's off by a few $100s or something. A lot of things that we've done due to the paperwork that's signed, we can normally go back to the buyer or seller and say, hey, it's miscalculated. You owe us like $200. But it's, if we miss a lien, it's one of those things that, all right, well, that's why you have your policy, and it's so rare that happens. And it's just based on your employees and your, their knowledge and picking stuff up and the diligence that they do with each search. So it's really not bad. The one thing that is huge in the market right now is wire fraud.
Right.
And so, you look at that and if, for lack of better research on our side of where it actually comes from, it's like a Yahoo account or a Google email account where they'll make up an email that is pretty close to everybody on that normal chain. And they're tracking them pretty hard with like keywords and whatever.
Sure. Watching it from the background is what I've heard they're doing.
Yeah. And so they'll catch a keyword like the upcoming closing or whatever it's going to be,
Sure.
or something with escrow, something with a wire, and they'll jump in and then they start spoofing back emails to either the buyer or the seller. That's normally where it's going to
come from.
Because they're probably the most vulnerable because they're not as privy to the research that the title company would have as far as wiring money back out. But it could be what my email is then at gmail.com. Well, theirs might be at GMA
IAL instead of
or like whatever, a capital.
It's quick enough that you don't see it.
No, it looks really, really close. And the thing is you got to be so diligent with anytime you're wiring money anywhere, doing anything with a transfer. And we did have this in Kansas City. One guy got spoofed, and it was a cash deal. He wired, I don't even remember what it was, $280,000 to somebody else. And, talking to us like, hey, where's my money? Will we close, whatever. We're like,
right.
We don't have your wire. And he's like, I sent it to you. You guys sent me an email last Thursday. Like, we didn't send you an email. But what had happened is one of the agents involved had a Gmail account and just jumped in the conversation and gave new wiring instructions. No,
and that's one of the things that I talk to with my clients, not only because we have the wire fraud addendum, but just as a whole, is that you have to be very cautious, and that if you see an email come through, reach out to me, or actually, I know, pick up the phone and call either myself or title, because you want to verify that is who sent you that email. Yes. Don't click on a link that's in the email. Don't call the number in the email. Reach out to your agent, who will reach out to the title company, because that's how they get you too, is they, put something in the email and that's who you think to call, and it's not who it is.
Right. Yeah. And they'll pick up, and they know exactly what your transaction is because they've been following. So they know enough about the transaction that you have to wire money somewhere.
Right.
And they'll give you the contact person you need with their phone number. And they'll answer it. Yeah, they'll confirm the wiring instructions because they know that they want you to send
that they want
their
to come
money.
to you.
Yeah, so it's it's one of those things. And if somebody other than your agent, your lender, or any title insurance contact that you have, and if you're not familiar with who your title insurance contact is, because that's more of a last minute situation, always reach out to your lender that you've been working with or your agent that you've been working with, and just make sure that nothing's changed, because obviously your agent and your lender will know the title person. They'll know the closer.
Right.
And those are the only three people that may even have anything with wire instructions. But if anything comes after the fact, like right before closing, hey, here's wire instructions, I need it today by 10. Anything that puts a rush on it, you got to question it.
Okay.
And anything that is like, 2 weeks before closing or a week before closing, like you got to question it. And it's one of those things, and people are going to get caught. And there's ways that we can go around. We're actually looking at a company right now that is going to kind of protect us against that.
Okay.
It may be another verification step for the borrower to wire funds.
Sure.
But it's going to be worth it if you take away a little bit of that risk that wire fraud could happen.
No, absolutely.
So it's one of those things. We're all into getting the buyer in the house, getting the buyer and the seller happy, everybody moving on, and everybody getting through it smooth and safe. And that's the key. That's the purpose.
So what do you say is your abridged or Cliff Notes version of what is title insurance?
Title insurance is going to protect your property from the unknown, basic prior to you closing, or the expanded what may not have happened yet. And by saying the unknown, it's something that is filed with the county or not filed with the county. It's going to be something you wouldn't even think about having a loss for, but your title insurance would jump in there and cover that, and make sure that you are the sole owner of your property and you only have the lien on your property that you intended to have on your property.
Right. Absolutely.
So I'd say that, it's the simplest version, but even just a Cliff Notes that, if you wanted to look, the Cliff Notes version that I printed off is about a page long, so
that's not the Cliff Notes. We want the one-liner.
I slid it down to one highlighted line as much as I could.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for talking about some of this stuff. And obviously, if you guys have more questions or things that you would like to ask us, feel free to put those in the comments or email to us, and we'll always make that something we can always talk about in the next episodes that come up. We do 30 Minutes with a Realtor the first Tuesday of every month, and always welcome topics of conversation. And we have a couple coming up. Next month, we're going to be joined with Matt. He's from Plum Right Plumbing, and we're going to talk about plumbing stuff, because with all the freezing and all the thawing and stuff, and some of the things we don't think about for plumbing. So Matt, it's 2 months of Matt's.
I was going to say, you got 2 months of good names coming up.
Right?
Don't miss them.
So thank you, Matt, for being here today. And thank you guys for joining us today on 30 Minutes with the Realtor. I'm Andrea Lane with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, and we will see you next month.
See you later. That was fun.